Today's daf is daf Chavav, and we'll begin with the Mishnah Hapayas Hashlishi. So what is included in the third payas? Chadoshim laktoras bo veithisu. First of all, there's going to be a payas for the ktoras, but we're only going to invite chadoshim. And the Gemara is going to explain that we're talking about Kohanim that have never had the opportunity and the privilege to bring the Ktoras. Haravi, and now we're up to the fourth payas, the last of the four, and that's Chadoshim and Mishanim. Here we make no difference between a Kohen who's ever fulfilled this avoda or a Kohen who's first time around. And the Gemara is going to explain why. Mi maila evarim min hakevesh lamizbeach. Who is going to bring? We had in the earlier payas a division of labor to bring the different segments and parts of the zevach onto the kevesh. Now we have to take these parts one by one from the kevesh and put them on the maracha to be mala them onto the mizbeach for haktorah purposes. Who's going to bring up these different limbs of the animal? And we're going to see that the limbs were on the kevesh towards the lower part of the kevesh. And now in this fourth lottery, what we call a payas haravi, we're going to assign to various kohanim respectively the job of taking them from the kevesh up to the mizbeach. Tosas indicates that one kohen will carry all the different parts from the kevesh up to the mizbeach. But Tosas Yeshanim, quoted by the Ritva, contends that many kohanim were used in this avodah of carrying the segments, the limbs, up the kevesh in order to place them on the mizbeach. Rashi is of the opinion, this is Rashi Masechet Sukkah, that the same Kohen who will carry the segments, the limbs of the animal to the top of the mizbeach, he will be the one to toss them onto the H, the maracha, and the fire of the mizbeach. The Ritva says that the one Kohen who was zoche in zrikas adam, he's the one who's going to actually put the limbs onto the H. The Ramban is of the opinion that this Mishnah, like all the Mishnahs that deal with payas, is relevant to Yoma Kippurim, and that's why it's here in Masechet Yoma. And even though the Kohen Gadol is makriv of all the karbanos of the day, nevertheless, if there are any parts, avarim, that were left over from the previous day, then the average Kohen would vie for the opportunity to place these limbs on the mizbeach, and therefore the privilege of divvying up those tasks was divvied up and through the lottery even on Yom Kippur. The Brisa says the following in the Gemara: Tana me olam lo shana adam ba. Never did a person get a second round at the Ketores. They would guarantee that only if you had never brought the Ketores would you be part of the lottery and get the rights to bring the Ketores. My timer, why is this so? And Omer Rab Chanina mipnei shema asheres. And the Gemara is going to derive from a pasuk that the Kohen who is involved in the avodah of the Ketores, he would be wealthy. He would be rewarded with wealth. So let's give this wonderful opportunity to the Ketores to maximize the number of Kohanim so that no Kohen would get it twice. There's no point. We want to save this skula, the special power of Ashirus that's inherent in the Ketores for as many Kohanim as possible. Amalei Rapopla by my time. Ilema, it would be apparent that you were learning it from the pasuk at the end of Dvarim, when V'zos HaBracha, Moshe Rabbeinu divvies out the brachos, and when he gets to Shevet Levi and the Kohanim, he says, Yasimu Ktores Ba'pecha, which is obviously a reference to the Ktores. And what's the blessing of Moshe? Immediately afterwards, it says, Barech Hashem Chelo. And God will bless his resources. Chelo means his resources, meaning his possessions, his financial assets. Says Rav Papa, that can't be the source, because we should only give out the Ola to one Kohen who has never done the Ola, because it says in that same pasuk, Khalil means completely, totally burnt, and that's a reference to the Korban Ola. We never found that with regard to the Korban Ola that we're only going to include in the pious a Kohen who has never brought the Korban Ola. And in fact, the Talmud that's brought twice a day is a Korban Ola. So therefore, the assumption is, says Rav Papa, there must be some other source from which we derive the special power inherent in the Avodah of the Torah to bring Ashiras. It can't be from this pasuk of Berech Hashem Chelo, because those words Berech Hashem Chelo go back to the pasuk, the words in the pasuk before the Khalil al Mizbechecha, referring to the Ola. Amalei hashchicha v'ha lo shchicha. Even though it's true that we could interpret Barech Hashem Chelo as referring even to the Khalil al Mizbecha, the Ola, but nevertheless, the Ola is quite frequent. It's called shchicha. And it makes more sense to assume that the bracha Berech Hashem Chelo is going for something that's less frequent. If it's so frequent, like the Ola and the Talmud, then we would say every last coin should be very wealthy. And that's not really true. If you want to talk about the special bracha for the Shevet Levi, then whenever you see a Talmud Chacham who has the ability to give you the final answer, forget about theoretical abstract analysis and lumps, but he can tell you, I'll leave it to Hilchasa, then you have one or two choices. Ela di Asi Mishevet Levi, either he is a descendant of Shevet Levi or Mishevet Yisachar. Why Levi? The Chsiv, in the blessing that Moshe Rabbeinu bestows upon Shevet Levi, Yoru Mishpatecha LiYaakov. They shall teach your Mishpatim to the children of Yaakov, to Bnei Yisrael. With regard to Yisachar, the Tanakh tells us, and in this case, we're going to quote a pasuk in the Yomim, the Chsiv umibnei Yisachar yodei vina leitim ladas mayasa Yisrael. That the tribe of Yisachar will include men of great wisdom, of understanding of the times. They will tell Israel and know what Israel should do. Had a paskin a shayla. Mari asks, V'ema Yehuda Nami. Maybe the tribe of Yehuda should also be included in this category of Morei Hora. D'chsiv Yehuda Mechalkeke. Judah is my lawgiver. And that pasuk appears in Tehillim. In fact, the truth is that if we go to the brachos in Vayechi of Yaakov, not V'zos HaBracha of Moshe, and there the Torah says that Lo Yoser Shevet Mi Yehuda Mechokik Mi Bein Raglav. So that pasuk likewise indicates that Yehuda is the lawgiver. Now, why is the Gemara quote a pasuk in Tillim when it could have quoted a pasuk in Bereshis? It seems that the pasuk in Chumash and Vayechi is only a blessing. We don't know, we don't have testimony that that blessing ever came to fruition. And that for that we need the pasuk in Tehillim that describes Yehuda as the Mechokikim. So Rava answers, you know what? There's no steer over here. I'm going to still insist that the great Chachma is reserved for Levi and Yisachar. And Yehuda has a different dimension of a different discipline of Torah. What's unique about Levi and Yisachar, and that's exclusive to those two Shvatim, is Asuke Shmaita Libede Hilchasa Kamina. They have the ability in all legal analyses. You could have a dissension, you could have an opinion like this and that. In all these dissections and analyses of the Torah, you can have many different views, and Yehuda will certainly be up there. But if you talk about Shmaita Libede Hilchasa, the ability to come to some practical halachic conclusion, not the abstract lumdus and the analysis, that's limited exclusively for Levi and Yisachar. Yehuda could certainly give us a beautiful pilpul shir and an analysis of the halacha, but you want to know how do we paskin at the end of the day, the final conclusion, that's going to be derived, or taught, I should say, from either Shevet Levi or Shevet Yisachar. Rabbi Yochanan, ein mefaisim al tamid shel bein arbayim. There is no special pious for the tamid of the afternoon. Ela kohen shezach bo shach zoch bo arvis. There's one pious for the tamid, and whichever kohen won the lottery, he gets the privilege not only of the tamid shel shach, but also of the tamid shel bein arbayim, which is called arvis because we're moving towards the end of the day when the sun is setting. And the Gemara now asks a kasha on Rabbi Yochanan. Meisvei, I have a brayso that says kishem shemefaisim shachris kach mefaisim bein arbayim. This brayso couldn't have been more outspoken about the fact that we need a special pious for the korban bein arbayim. Gemara says no. Ki Tanya, that brayso, he Victores. It's referring to the Ketores. And with regard to the Ketores, we have a double, twice a day, we have a Ketara of the Ketores. And we will have a separate ayis for the Ketores shel bein arbayim. Now, it could be, I'm not sure, that the reason why we need a new pious for the Ketores in the afternoon is because, as we said before, there was never a Kohen who was able, on two occasions, to bring the Ketores. So since Kohen X got the rights by winning the morning lottery to bring the Ketores in the morning, he had to exclude himself from those rights and from participating in the lottery of the afternoon Ketores. And the reason for this is because the afternoon Ketores gives us another opportunity to bestow upon a different Kohen who has never brought the Ketores the blessing of Ashirus. So let's just summarize. Rabbi Yochanan is claiming that as far as the korban tamid is concerned, that Kohen who got the korban tamid in the morning, he would automatically have won the privilege of the tamid shel bein arbayim. As far as the brayso is concerned, that we have a separate pious for bein arbayim, that's only with regard to the Ketores. And the different thing is that the Ketores we want to divvy it out twice to the same Kohen, which is not the case with regard to a korban olah like the tamid. Or again, is going to raise an objection to Rabbi Yochanan from a different brisa. But Tanya kshem shemafaisim lo shachris kach mafaisim lo arvis. Look at the word lo. The word lo is written in the grammatical masculine. It cannot be referring to the ketores. So this brisa for sure is referring to a carbon, namely the carbon tonic, and it's telling you that just like we implemented a pious for the Talmud Shel Shachar, then that pious covers even the Talmud Shel Ben Arbayim. And the Gemara says, Emo Lo. According to, in order to defend the position of Yochanan, we'll have to stretch it a little, and we're going to change the lo to a law. So the Gemara immediately asks, Vasanya, what about the following price? Kishem shemefaisim lo shachris, kach mefaisim lo arvis, again in the masculine. But then the Brisa says, Kishem shemefaisim lo shachris, kach mefaisim lo arvis. So the Sefer uses in consideration the feminine because it's referring to the Ketores, and the Ketores is Lashon and Keva. Therefore, by process of elimination, the lo in the Reisha could not be talking about the Ketores because it wouldn't be described as lo, but rather it's referring to the Tamid. And there's a separate pius for the Tamid Shel Arvis. Amar Rav Shmuel bar Rav Yitzchak, I'm going to defend Rabbi Yochanan. Hoel umishmaros mischadshos. That in this brisa we're talking about Shabbos in the afternoon when there's a brand new mishmeres hanichneses that's going in. And therefore, we should require an additional pious for the avoda of the afternoon. That's called avodos or mishmaros mischadshos. So that now Rav Shmuel bar Yitzchak, in his challenge that he apparently accepted upon himself to defend Rabbi Yochanan, now he has a great challenge because we have both parts of this brisa clearly indicating that there's going to be a separate lot or lottery for the pious of Arvis. So he says, no, hacha b'Shabbos askin, the whole mishmaros mischadshos. What happens in the afternoon of Shabbos? You have a brand new mishmeres that comes in. Then we need a pious because the morning pious wouldn't have any impact. It wouldn't be relevant at all to the new shift of the mishmeres of Kohanim who are coming in the afternoon. The Gemara says, the Gemara now wants to get into the brain, the mindset of the makshan, the dissenting view, meaning that we need a separate pious in the afternoon for the Talmud Shel Ben Arbayim. The Mai Desalka Daitach Meikara is Nefishi Luhu Paisos. You really have significantly jacked up the number of Paisos here because you got to add the Talmud Shel Ben Arbayim. Now, our Mishnah said that the maximum number of pious in one day is 4. If the Gemara is rejecting Rabbi Yochanan and we need a separate pious for the afternoon Talmud, then you can no longer limit yourself to the number 4. If there was a pious in the afternoon. Nefishile Paisos. So how do we understand the Maksha? And again, we don't have a name. It's sort of like this anonymous Tano, or more likely Namora, who is arguing that we need a separate pious for the Talmud Shel Ben Arbaim. How are you going to fit that into the Mishnah that maxes out at 4? Moran says, Maisi Kulu Mitzafra Os. That what the Mishnah has in mind is how many times we gather them together to do the pious, and we max out at the number 4. In the case of Tamid, they would gather together the Kohanim who are vying for the Avodah, only once, meaning once to cover both the Talmud Shel Shachar and the Talmud Shel Ben Arbayim. And the Zachi Bei Shachris, Zachi. The Zachi Bei Arvis, Zachi. So the Gemara is saying here that we're not going to have a special gathering in order to do a lottery for the Talmud Shel Ben Arbayim. The lottery for the Talmud Shel Ben Arbayim will actually be implemented in the morning together with the same identical lottery that they use for the Talmud Shel Shachar. So Zochi Bei Shachar is Zochi. One coin was Zocher for Shachris, and Zochi Bei Arv is Zochi. And a different coin was Zocher for the Talmud Shel Ben Arbayim. Now, the end of the Mishnah formulates the 4th of the 4 piyusim of paisos. Harvi chadoshim im yishonim. Now we're talking about taking the limbs of the carbon from the kevesh onto the mizbeach. And one thing is crystal clear from this Mishnah, that those kohanim who are in charge of taking the parts of the carbon from the kevesh to the mizbeach, they're not the same as those who brought them up to the kevesh to begin with. So we have one set of kohanim that bring the limbs, up to the kevesh, and after that we have a second set of kohanim who are going to come and take those segments, those avarim, and put them onto the mizbeach. Says the Gemara, you're telling me that there are 2 sets of kohanim. One set of kohanim will carry the avarim from the kevesh to the mizbeach. They're not the same that put them, the avarim, to begin with on the kevesh. Masnisin delo Rabbi Eliezer and Yaakov. Isnan, we have a Mishnah in Masechet Tamid. Rabbi Eliezer and Yaakov, Omer Hamala Avarim La Kevesh Hu Milo Som Mizbeach. The same kohanim who bring the avarim onto the kevesh will bring the avarim onto the mizbeach. B'maikam miflagi, Marsava, referring to our Mishnah, Barov Am Hadras Melech. The more kohanim that we could get involved in, the better. So therefore, the kohanim who won the pious to bring the avarim to the kevesh are not the same as the kohanim who would carry the limbs from the kevesh onto the mizbeach. So again, let's just go over this. The Mishnah in Tamid is recording the Shita of Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, to the effect that the same Kohen who puts the Avarim onto the Kevesh is the same fellow who had the schus to take the Avarim from the Kevesh and put them on the Mizbeh. And our Mishnah says no, that the fourth pious had two parts to it. And I shouldn't say the fourth part. What I mean to say is that the fourth pious would determine which Kohanim would carry or would be Zorek, the parts of the animal, the Avarim of the animal, onto the Mizbeach. And we see clearly that our Mishnah holds that there are two sets of Kohanim. There are Kohanim who put the limbs on the Kevesh, and there are Kohanim, a different set of Kohanim, that bring the Avarim from the Kevesh onto the Mizbeach. So what is the Machlokes? According to our Mishnah, we're going to have two groups of Kohanim. So we're really expanding the Avodah. And that's called Berova Majus Melech, which, by the way, is a posuk in Mishlei. Umar Sover, according to Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, Makom Shechina Lav Urach Ara. What are you doing? You are now telling the first set of Kohanim who brought the Avarim onto the Kevesh, you know what? Go home, take it easy, take a rest. In that sense, you are sort of insulting Makom Shechina. Right? What are you doing? You're implying, again, it's only because of Rovam, but that, you know what, this is a Tircha Gdola. So let's not impose on the same Kohen a double Tircha. Let's make life easier for him and alleviate his pressure, and let a second group of Kohanim come together and put the limbs onto the Eish HaMizbeh. Omar Rav. Rav says the following. Lo Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov Islay de Rabbi Yehuda, velo Rabbi Yehuda Islay de Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. These two shitos are mutually exclusive. Why? So first of all, let's just reiterate Rabbi Yehuda's shita. Rabbi Yehuda was of the opinion, this we had back on Daf Chav Hey, that as far as the Ketores is concerned, there's no separate Hagrola, there's no separate pious for the right to bring the Gecholim for the Ketores. And then we have Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov that we discussed, and he's of the opinion that there's one set of Kohanim will be Mila, the Avarim, and will be Malo Somla Mizbeh. You cannot, says Rava, combine these two shitas. They're mutually exclusive. Why didn't Cain? If you're going to try to piggyback one of these shitas on the shoulders of the other, is Patru Le Paisos. Then you'll have less than 4 Paisos. Why? Because you're going to tell me that there's no separate pious for bringing the coals, the gecholim, into the area. Let's call it the inner chambers of where we'll put the keres on top of the moon. And if we were to combine the two, then Batzrule Paisos, you'll be missing a 4th pious. Why? Because number one, you excluded the Gecholim as far as the Ketor is concerned, bringing in the Gecholim. And number two, you're holding that there's only one Kohen who will do both the halah onto the kevish and halah onto the mizbeach. So if it's only one set of kohanim, we don't need a separate pious for hu maila osam la mizbeach. And Rava says, "We mishkachas tana the tani chamesh." If you find a tana that holds that that they had to gather and cast lotes not 4 times a day, but 5 times a day, if you find such a tana. Then if you turn now to Chafvavam and Beis, Hahu delo ki Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, udelo ki Rabbi Yehuda. If you find a tana that says there are 5, then that tana cannot possibly be Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. So he reduced it by imposing both halah and halah on the same shoulders of the Kohen, and it cannot be Rabbi Yehuda because Rabbi Yehuda diminishes the number of Kohanim because he says that there's no pious for the assistant to the Ketores, if we can call him that. This is where we'll stop on the top of Daf Chaf Vav Amid Beis, and we'll immediately, in Mitzvah Hashem, pick up the Mishnah.